This is part 4 of the Canon 5D Classic, as everyone calls it now, but I call it the 5D Mk1. Just looking at the menus is going to look pretty old-fashioned if you're used to looking at modern Canon cameras. I'm just going to go through some of the settings I use, why I use them. Might help you when you're setting your 5D up. Quality, I shoot RAW, and I also produce a small JPEG. So if we go in there, you can see I use RAW and a compressed medium JPEG. I find I use that because I use iFi cards. And quickly get one out so you can have a quick look. So I'm using an adapter. And I'm using the iFi card. If you look at one of the other videos, there's 4 parts, so I'm going to do one playlist, so you should be able to have a look back. The iFi card, 32 gig, with this adapter, works absolutely fine. Been using it for quite a few years now. I did use the orange card, sorry, and then I moved on to the black ones. I moved on to the black ones because you can shoot and you can put RAWs straight on there and transfer the RAWs to your iPad or your iPhone or your computer. I thought I'd be doing that, then realised how long it would take. So anyway, I use the Pro card and I use the adapter to do that. See if we can get this thing going again. So, looking on the screen then, so the medium JPEG is the one that I use to transfer. The RAW file goes on there and the medium JPEG, and then the medium JPEG gets transmitted straight to the iPad and acts as a backup. I know that that medium JPEG, I can make a wedding album perfectly fine. From that I can make canvas prints, no problem at all. The resolution, and you know, I've tried and tested this. So that's the setup there. You can use small JPEGs to transfer, but I've just found that this file gives me everything I need. So beep off, again, that's optional. Beep on can be very useful if you're not working in a quiet environment, like I'm working in churches and I'm working, with registrars and registry offices. So they don't like having the beep on, so I don't use it. But the beep is just to confirm that you're focused. So if you're in one-shot mode and you confirm focus, it'll go beep. So it can be useful. Shoot without card is very, very, very important. Very, 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 very. How many verys can I use? I would really use this in the off position. Shoot without card. What does that mean then? Well, God, it scares me just to put it there. It meant if you forget to put your card in and you start weddings or whatever you're doing, that it will carry on and let you shoot without your card, which is completely ridiculous because the image is going nowhere. And obviously if you did enough photos and then realised you didn't have a card, well, it would be big trouble. So that's definitely off. Exposure bracketing. You can use that for setting up either side of an exposure. They would call that HDR now, really. Exposure bracket can also be used because if you're shooting JPEG only and your exposure has got to be absolutely spot on, you can just set it like that and it will do one slightly darker and one slightly lighter in a sequence of 3. You can go to 2/3 of a stop or 1 stop either side. Also, if you like HDR images, it's very useful because you can do sequences and then combine the images later on. And you can do that with the RAW ones as well. So you've got a very wide dynamic range. So yeah, it's quite useful. White balance shift, you can have a play around with that. It's not something for me. I'm using white balance and I'm using the RAW workflow and Lightroom, so I don't really get involved with this. Again, if you were a JPEG photographer, and this camera was very much, Lightroom hadn't quite been brought out, to be honest with you, so everything's changed since Lightroom came along. But no, don't use that. Custom white balance. This is where you can take your custom white balance and you can set it up. Again, custom white balance is something I've completely abandoned with weddings and white balance cards. Completely abandoned it all because I actually use a colour temperature of 5000K. That's my reference point for all my images. It's right in the middle. Its daylight is 5200. So yes, we'll go into that. But yeah, in the part 3 video, I had a look at second-hand equipment. In the part 2, I'm sure I had a look at this. At the end of the day, white balance is something that you've got to get into. Get yourself a white balance card and you'll start to work out what colour temperature actually is, different buildings. To give you an idea, 4000K would be a mixed light situation. In the average sort of church registry office, you're getting a mixture of light and you're about 4000K, and as you edit more images you'll start to get to know your white balance. So I just set it at 5000K and adjust in RAW in Lightroom again. Colour space sRGB. Search the internet for the sRGB and what you'll find is web browsers do not really understand Adobe RGB, so they do not show your files very well. So sRGB is the one that you really want to be using if you're producing a JPEG. It's a colour space. So sRGB, if you're getting a JPEG out of this camera and you're trying to put it online, when I last did this video a long time ago, the comments just absolutely flew that I got this wrong, and I did, but I only got it wrong because I'd indicated I'm a RAW workflow photographer, and they were saying, well, why are you worrying about sRGB? You've got to look into your colour spaces. I mean, it's a topic that goes on further than ISO. I mean, the internet's favourite subject is ISO and Adobe RGB, sRGB. The main reason, if you're producing JPEGs out of this camera or any camera and you want them to go online, use them Instagram, Facebook, browsers do not understand Adobe RGB. Again, comments below, tell me what you think. I'm sure you've all looked into it a lot more than me. At the end of the day, I shoot sRGB and I shoot a JPEG, so therefore if I'm going to use that JPEG, I want it to be straight out of the camera, I want it to be on the laptop, then I want it to be able to be used online. Picture style, always neutral, 000. Again, the JPEG I do use for reference on the iPad now. Things have moved on. I do actually use that as a reference print. So I shoot neutral on this camera. It's probably the biggest, you know, the most important element of my style is the neutral images. Protect, whatever. There's lots of little things. Rotate, we won't worry about that. Print order, autoplay, review time. So review time I use at 8 seconds. I found that's about right. That I want to see that image once I take it. I want to be able to see that image for 8 seconds, so I use 8 seconds. AF points are display. Histogram, the only thing I'm interested in histogram is the density and the position of those pixels on the graph, so I'm just looking to expose to the right for the highlights with Canon 5D Mark 1s. The 5D Mark 4 has completely changed everything with this, so you know, when you're looking at this video, just have a look. You've got to be into the technology, you've got to look at what's changed with these cameras. They've gone more towards what Nikon are doing as far as the shadows, but when you're working with a 5D Mark 1, believe me, you're in the world of exposing to the right, which is exposing for the white, which people say is overexposing. Slightly overexposing the file and then making it darker in software is the key. Making a dark file and then increasing the brightness in software is not the key. So the reason I can get the images out of this camera to look how the brides light them with the light in the eyes and that general feel of, well, openness is the word, of the shadows, is to overexpose, and then with the raw file to make it darker in software if you need to, which is a big tip, and something that if you come in from Nikon will be a big shock. So you've got to get to know these sensors. There's plenty on the internet about it, but again, just remember the technology has changed. By the time you're watching this, and the A9 might be the A10, Sony have changed everything with their sensors, and Canon have just got there with the 5D Mark IV. So you might be watching this when the 5D Mark 7's out and you're thinking about buying this classic camera. These were the days when things were different, that's all I can say. And you had to look after, well, what you have to do is you basically have to think of it as the opposite of what everyone was taught. Everyone was taught to protect the highlights. Don't ever let the highlights blow away. But when you're shooting raw with this camera, you actually want to overexpose. Okay. Auto power off I put at 30 minutes because I transfer over to the iPad, so I do not want it switching off when it's transferring. I constantly have the iPad on in the bag, so as it transfers over, I just want that file backed up constantly. Auto rotate on. LCD brightness is in the middle. Now, something worth doing is setting up your monitor with the back of the screen. So your home monitor, the back of the screen, you get a full workflow, and your iPad, have a look at your iPad brightness, get them all together, get outside in the light, and you start to try and synchronize your whole workflow. That's one of the most important elements of doing anything with these cameras, in my opinion. Get the time and date right, because if you don't, you're using two bodies. When you import into the timeline in Lightroom, they all come in different orders. Believe me, I've done it a few times. It's probably one of the most annoying things you can do as a wedding photographer, and one of the many reasons I only use one body now and one camera if I can help it, with the backup camera that's never used. It just sits there ready to be used when if you get a failure of equipment. But this is very important. So you can see it's 2017. Get the time right. The time is very important. You want to synchronize your two cameras. I literally have the bodies next to each other and set them to the second, because I want the files to be in the right order when they're imported into Lightroom. File numbering is continuous. Folder, there you go, there's my folder. It's been the same folder. You can create your own folder. You can put it as the bride's name or whatever you're doing. So let's carry on. Language is English. Video system. Communication. Format. Now, a big tip with the 5D, which you can come unstuck on, is if you were to leave that on there and then you carry on shooting away, and you were to brush this against your body and it was to hit the menu, just think how close you are to formatting your card. That's what I'm trying to say. So what I tend to get in the habit of doing with this camera, if I just whiz through, is just put it on beep. So that if you do ever hit that, the most that can ever happen is you put the beep back on by accident, and that will indicate to you that you've actually obviously done something wrong, and the beep will come back on and you'll know, go back in the menu, turn the beep off. That's a big tip. Do not leave this stuck right down here on format, and you're very, very close to formatting your card. If that was to hit on your body and then you were to hit set, you're only one step away from deleting the whole wedding, which is not good. So there you go. That's a big tip from someone that hasn't deleted a whole wedding, luckily, but has realised when you've looked at the screen at some stage, which I have done before, that the menu's on, and you think, oh my goodness, I'm so close to deleting this wedding. My legs are going to sleep now. This is just going to be a shorter video. Let me scroll down and we will go to firmware. That's the last firmware. You won't honestly find anything further than that. If you do, let me know if there's a 1.1.2. I'd love to know. I haven't looked for yours. Good point. Comments below. Tell me if there's a new firmware. Thank you. Up to the top. We're back at quality again. How could we do the whole of a camera in that amount of time and me talking a lot? It's because there's nothing in the menu. One of the biggest things I hate about the modern cameras is they insist on having menus that go on forever. I don't want it, to be honest. We just want them nice and simple, quick. That's what we want. You do have the options for custom functions on this camera, and we could go through those. So let me just pause this and then we'll see whether we can do a bit more.